Michael sat by the wide glass window of his modern duplex in Lagos, staring at nothing. The silence pressed against his chest like a physical weight. 3 years had passed since he'd been touched by a woman. 2 years since he'd smiled genuinely. His wife Deborah had died in a freak car accident on 3rd Mainland Bridge, and everything inside him had stopped moving that day. The house felt like a tomb. No laughter. No soft gospel songs humming from the kitchen. No children's voices. Just the oppressive quiet of grief that had settled into every corner. His friends kept telling him the same thing, hire a housemaid, Mike. Someone to cook, clean, make the place feel human again. He resisted for months. The thought of another woman in Deborah's kitchen, touching her things, occupying her space, it felt like betrayal. But survival has a way of wearing down resistance. So finally, reluctantly, he agreed. The Lagos heat that afternoon felt personal, like the sun had decided to punish his rooftop specifically. Michael waited, uncertain, wondering what kind of person would walk through his door. He didn't know that the woman about to arrive wasn't coming to help him heal. She was coming to finish what she'd started years ago. When the soft knock finally came, Michael's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the doorknob. He had no idea he was opening the door to his past, his future, and his nightmare, all wrapped in the same person. She appeared without warning, no agency, no references, just a soft clearing of her throat at the door. When Michael opened it, his eyes immediately caught curves that refused to be ignored. She wore a simple wrapper and sleeveless blouse, yet something about her seemed calculated, too prepared. "Good afternoon, sir. I'm here for the housemaid job," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "My name is Amara." She said it slowly, deliberately, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. No nervous energy, no fumbling with words. It was as if she'd rehearsed the line 1,000 times in front of a mirror. Michael let her in, unsure whether this was the right decision or just another attempt to quiet the ghost haunting his empty house. As she walked past him, a faint scent of vanilla soap and dust followed. She didn't look around curiously like most people would when entering a new place. She just went straight to the corner of the living room and stood, hands folded, waiting. That subtle confidence was the first thing that made Michael tilt his head. Most housemates he'd interviewed were shy, overly respectful, almost timid. Amara looked settled, as if she already belonged here. The first 2 days were eerily quiet. She cleaned without noise, cooked without being asked what he liked, and moved through the house like she already knew its layout. Michael watched her from the stairs sometimes, trying to figure out what didn't add up. She never touched his personal things, yet somehow every morning his missing socks reappeared, folded neatly in his drawer. She never asked about Deborah, yet she never entered the master bedroom either. One morning, Michael walked into the kitchen and caught Amara staring out the window, not cleaning, not cooking, just staring. Her face looked completely blank, not sad or tired, just empty. Like someone had pressed pause on her thoughts. The moment he cleared his throat, she snapped back into motion, picking up a cloth to wipe a surface that was already spotless. That moment stayed with him. The way she snapped back, too quickly, too rehearsed, made him pause. Something whispered in the back of his mind, this woman is performing. Michael tried to tell himself he was overthinking. She was just a housemaid doing her job. But the feeling had rooted itself deep in his gut, growing stronger each day. Then came the small inconsistencies. His late wife's Bible, the one that always stayed on the bookshelf untouched, had been moved. Not far, but just enough to be obvious to someone who knew every corner of the house. He didn't mention it. He simply returned it to its place and watched. The next day, it was moved again, slightly tilted, as if someone had opened it and closed it in a hurry. He asked Amara casually one evening, "Do you pray often?" She smiled and nodded. "Always, sir." But her tone lacked warmth. It was just another rehearsed line. Michael began keeping mental notes. She was efficient, polite, respectful, yet completely unreadable. Her eyes always looked like they were hiding something. Not fear, not trauma, but purpose. Like she had come here not to work but to watch something unfold. Sometimes at night, he heard her footsteps, slow, light, almost rhythmic, moving across the house. She never entered his room, but he began locking the door, unsure why. Instinct whispered that he didn't know who she really was. Amara started cooking meals that Deborah used to make. Jollof rice with exactly the right pepper balance. Okra soup thickened just the way Deborah insisted. Michael never taught her these recipes. He never mentioned them. So how did she know? At first, he thought it was coincidence. But coincidence doesn't repeat itself with such precision. This was intentional, subtle, disturbing. It was like she was merging with his memories, slowly becoming what he'd lost but with different, darker intentions. One Sunday evening, Michael sat on the back balcony sipping black coffee. Amara was downstairs hanging laundry. He watched her through the railing, her movements graceful and theatrical, like a performer hitting all the right marks. She didn't hum. She didn't whistle. She just existed, like a presence more than a person. Michael whispered to himself, "What's your story, Amara?" The name felt heavy on his tongue, as though saying it aloud gave her more power. He started asking subtle questions during dinner. "Where's home for you? Any family around?" Her answers were always vague. "Enugu," she said. "No family here." When asked about her last job, she replied simply, "It ended." They traveled. Nothing specific, no names, no details, just disappearing trails. It was as though she had scrubbed herself clean of any real history. And yet she fit into his life too smoothly, like a puzzle piece that didn't belong but somehow clicked into place. Michael tried to ignore it. The way his eyes began following Amara involuntarily. The way her hips swayed rhythmically as she walked past. The way her voice, low and delicate, echoed in his mind long after she'd spoken. He hated himself for noticing. For feeling. For staring too long at the shape of her back when she bent to sweep. For smelling the soap on her skin hours after she'd left a room. But his body wasn't numb anymore, and that terrified him more than the silence ever had. Her presence filled the house in ways Deborah's memory no longer could. Michael tried to hold onto his grief like a shield, but grief was slow, and Amara was fast, in how she moved, adapted, and inserted herself into the rhythms of his life without ever overstepping. It felt orchestrated, like she had studied what men like him needed: peace, routine, softness. And she delivered it all without question. But that delivery felt too tailored, too convenient, too rehearsed. The nights were the hardest. When silence thickened and Deborah's photos looked back at him from the walls like eyes full of judgment, that's when the battle inside him worsened. Sometimes he dreamt of Deborah, of her scent, her voice, the last fight they'd had before she died. One particular night, her voice came clearly in the dream, "Don't let her in." Michael jolted awake, heart racing, chest soaked in sweat. He stumbled out of bed to drink water but froze at the sight of a shadow outside his window. Amara stood in the backyard, still as a statue, facing the darkness. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Her white wrapper glowed faintly in the moonlight. Michael watched, breath caught in his throat. What was she doing out there? Why that posture, so still, so eerie? After a long moment, she turned and walked back inside as if nothing had happened. She never mentioned it. Neither did he. But that image carved itself into his mind. The tension built like pressure in a sealed container. And then it happened on a Thursday evening. Michael had returned early from work, rain soaking his clothes. The power was out. The house was dim, the air thick with heat. Amara brought him a towel without speaking. He accepted it without looking at her. But when their hands brushed, something cracked open. A moment passed, charged, awkward, electric, and then it happened. No words, no warning. Just a kiss. Gentle at first, then hungry, then wild. It was as if all the loneliness, guilt, confusion, and temptation collided at once. He didn't stop it. When it ended, neither of them spoke. She adjusted her wrapper and left the room like nothing had happened. Michael sat there, stunned, heart pounding, trying to make sense of what had just unfolded. What had he done? Days later, it happened again. This time in the kitchen, in the quiet middle of the night. No talking, just need. But each time, it took more from him and left him emptier. Michael found himself trapped between two ghosts, Deborah's memory and Amara's presence. He didn't know which one scared him more. The more intimate they became, the more detached Amara grew. She became colder, still respectful, still composed, but something changed in her eyes. Less warmth, less light, more calculation. How could she offer her body and still feel unreachable? It wasn't intimacy. It was access. And that difference haunted him. Then Michael's old colleague Kola came over for drinks one evening, a jovial, talkative man who hadn't visited since Deborah's funeral. They reminisced briefly, both men tiptoeing around the pain still floating in the room like smoke. When Amara brought in peppered goat meat and cold juice, Kola glanced at her, then froze. His eyes narrowed slightly. After she left, he leaned forward and said something Michael would never forget. "Isn't that Amara, the girl from Deborah's office?" Michael blinked. "What are you talking about?" Kola nodded slowly. "Yeah, Amara. She worked with us years back. Admin unit. She was different. Kept to herself, always watching Deborah." The room went cold. Michael's fingers tightened around his glass. That name, that past, that connection. He had never heard Amara mention Deborah. Not once. After Kola left, Michael didn't sleep. His heart pounded like it wanted out of his chest. He sat in his study for hours, every second unraveling the illusion he'd been living in. How could Amara have worked with Deborah and never mentioned it? How did she end up as a housemaid in his home years after Deborah's death? Coincidence didn't stretch that far. The universe wasn't that creative. This was planned. He was sure of it now. The only question was, why? The truth was older than Michael realized, buried deep in fluorescent-lit office corridors and unspoken rivalry. Years ago, Amara had walked into that architecture firm with ambition. But ambition, when mixed with entitlement, becomes venom. Deborah had risen fast, her charm, her discipline, her designs. Clients loved her. Bosses promoted her. Amara watched from the shadows, always confident, never chosen. She would stay late, pretending to finish fires while secretly monitoring Deborah's moves. She envied everything, her confidence, her husband, her life. A woman who had it all, love, career, peace. While Amara was just another face in the HR cubicle, she smiled in meetings, but her thoughts cuddled with silent rage. She studied Deborah like prey, noting flaws and weaknesses, everything that could be turned against her. It started small, rumors at work, subtle sabotage of Deborah's reports, misfiled emails, miscued numbers. She once accidentally forwarded a private client complaint meant for management to the whole staff. Deborah confronted her once, gently and professionally. But that only deepened Amara's hatred. In Amara's twisted mind, Deborah wasn't just lucky, she was undeserving. And that belief gave her justification. Amara's envy didn't stop at Deborah's desk. She envied the marriage, the joy, the way Michael used to wait in the car to pick his wife up from work. She watched them from the office window once, the way Deborah leaned into the car laughing, how Michael kissed her forehead. That moment planted something wicked in Amara's heart. Not sadness, not longing, but obsession. She began following Deborah after work. Once, then again, learning her routes, her habits, her vulnerabilities. The day Deborah died in that car crash, it was raining. Her brakes failed on 3rd Mainland Bridge. Michael wept for months. The car had no reported issues. The mechanic found the brake lines had been worn unnaturally but ruled it out as corrosion. No foul play suspected. But Michael now saw the cracks. Who had access to the office parking? Who knew when Deborah worked late? Who had the coldness to smile through funerals? Amara vanished after Deborah's death, quit her job quietly, disappeared. Michael never connected the dots. Why would he? Until now. Until the ghost of her past walked into his home with a wrapper tied at her waist and meals too well prepared. Michael didn't plan to check her phone. It wasn't something he did, he respected boundaries, even with people he no longer trusted. But something about the way Amara had been humming lately, the renewed confidence in her steps, pushed him over the edge. That morning, she left her phone charging on the dining table and went into the shower. It buzzed once, then again. Something inside Michael said, "This is your only chance." His fingers hesitated for half a second, trembling, then moved with urgency. He opened WhatsApp. The last message was unsent, a voice note still processing. Below it, dozens of deleted messages between two contacts named Luce and me. Michael scrolled fast, heart hammering. Then he clicked the chat with me and froze. It wasn't a conversation. It was a diary. Amara had been texting herself for months, long entries, some normal, others chilling. And in one of them, she confessed. "He has no idea. I knew Deborah. He sleeps with me now. The woman I helped destroy is buried in the ground. And her husband kisses my back at night. Life is sweet." Michael felt his hands go numb. The next message was worse. "Sometimes I imagine telling him the truth. That I saw Deborah leave the office that day. That I followed her to her car. That I loosened the brake line myself while she was on the phone. But no, not yet. Not until he says he loves me." Michael nearly dropped the phone. He scrolled further, desperate for something, a lie, a joke, anything to undo what he'd just read. But the entries continued, darker and more unhinged. She had everything. The job, the man, the life. I couldn't watch her win. Not when I was losing every day. Not when no one saw me. Michael's breath caught. He looked up as the shower stopped running. He quickly placed the phone back where it was and backed away like he'd touched fire. His mind raced. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was murder, manipulation. And he had been sleeping beside it for weeks. Amara stepped out minutes later, wrapped in a towel, water dripping from her shoulders. She smiled as usual. "Should I make breakfast?" she asked softly. Michael nodded. His voice didn't work. His limbs felt mechanical. His chest pounded with panic and disgust. He stared at her, really stared, and saw the woman behind the apron. The woman who ended Deborah's life, wore her routines like clothes, and claimed his home like stolen property. But even as rage boiled beneath his skin, something stopped him from speaking. A shadow on her stomach. A slight, gentle curve. Not bloat, not random. He blinked. "No. Please no." She caught his glance and smiled wider this time. Then, as if reading his thoughts, she said, "I was going to tell you tonight. I'm pregnant." Michael's world shattered. Time froze. His mouth went dry. His knees weakened beneath him. Pregnant. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. He stared at her, a thousand emotions crashing at once, betrayal, guilt, hatred, fear. Amara looked down at her stomach, then at him again. "It's yours," she said simply. Michael wanted to scream, run, fight. But he stood there, stunned, trapped in the very nightmare he never saw coming. He thought about the messages, the murder, the manipulation, and now a baby. He sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on knees, head buried in his hands. Amara stood quietly in the kitchen, humming to herself, gently slicing bread like nothing had happened, like this was just another ordinary morning. But Michael couldn't breathe. The walls felt tighter. The house felt colder. His memories of Deborah slammed into his brain like knives, her laugh, her perfume, her plans for children. And now her killer was pregnant with his child. Michael wanted answers. He wanted justice. But more than anything, he wanted time, time to undo the past, time to fix the present. But time, cruel as ever, had moved forward without mercy. Later that night, Amara approached Michael in his study. She placed a glass of juice beside his elbow. "Are you okay?" she asked. Michael didn't respond. He stared ahead, jaw clenched. Then Amara said something that made his skin crawl. "You always said Deborah would have made a good mother." Maybe now you'll get to see what kind of mother I can be. He stood up. Don't talk about her. Her eyes narrowed. But I am here now. You made that choice. Michael's fist clenched. I didn't know who you were. She shrugged. You never asked. The silence between them grew violent, not with words, but with history. He left the room. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat outside under the moon, chain-smoking, staring at the stars for answers they refused to give. What was he supposed to do now? Report her. Send her to jail. Raise the child. Abandon it. Nothing made sense. And yet something whispered to him, the baby is innocent. But even innocence couldn't erase the truth. He had been tricked, used, played. The woman who shattered his world was now holding his future inside her. And that future wore his DNA. By the next evening, Michael sat her down. I know everything, he said coldly. Your past. Deborah. The break line. The messages. Everything. Amara said nothing at first. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then she smiled, a sad, hollow smile. I didn't come here to kill you, Michael, she whispered. I came here to be loved. Even if I didn't deserve it. He stared at her, unable to find words. His heart split between justice and mercy. Amara continued, I know I'm broken. I know I did something unforgivable. But this child, it's real. This child didn't do anything wrong. Michael looked at her belly, then at her face, and for the first time saw someone who wasn't evil, just empty, twisted by time, envy, and loneliness. But did that make it forgivable? The question hung in the air like smoke, refusing to dissipate. Michael walked to the window, looking out at the Lagos night. Behind him, Amara remained still, waiting for a judgment that might never come. The final days were quiet. Michael moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding Amara's eyes, eating meals in silence, sleeping with his door locked. Amara packed a small bag one morning. She didn't fight. She didn't beg. She just left a note on the table. I won't ask you to forgive me. I won't even ask you to understand. But when this child asks about their father one day, I'll tell them you were a good man who got caught in someone else's war. I'm sorry for what I did to Deborah. I'm sorry for what I did to you. Some people don't deserve second chances. I know I'm one of them. Michael found the note hours later. He stared at it for a long time, then crumpled it in his fist. He sat alone in the master bedroom, holding a small framed photo of Deborah. His eyes were glassy, red-rimmed. The house was still again, the same terrible stillness that had driven him to hire help in the first place. But this stillness was different. It wasn't empty. It was full of ghosts, questions, and a choice he couldn't make. Weeks passed. Michael tried to return to normal life, but normal didn't exist anymore. He went to work, came home, locked doors, checked shadows. The house remained clean but felt haunted. Then one evening, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Hello. Silence. Then Amara's voice, small and distant, it's a girl. If you want to know. Michael's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. I won't contact you again, she continued. But I thought you should know. She has your eyes. The line went dead. Michael sat there, phone still pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face. He thought about Deborah, about justice, about innocence, about the impossible weight of being human. In the end, he didn't know if he'd made the right choice by letting Amara go. He didn't know if there was a right choice. Some stories don't have clean endings. Some wounds don't heal, they just scar over, forever tender, forever reminding you of what was lost and what can never be recovered. Michael stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at Lagos. The city moved on, indifferent to his pain. And somewhere out there, a little girl with his eyes was growing up, carrying a history she'd never asked for. The house remained quiet. But now Michael understood that silence comes in many forms. Some silences are peaceful. Others are punishments. And some, like his, are simply the sound of questions that will never be answered. This story carries profound lessons that echo beyond its tragic narrative. Grief makes us vulnerable. Michael's loneliness blinded him to red flags that might have saved him from disaster. When we are broken, we often accept comfort from the wrong sources. Healing should never be rushed, and we must guard our hearts carefully during seasons of loss. Justice and mercy are sometimes impossible to balance. Michael faced an unwinnable situation: punish the guilty mother and hurt the innocent child, or show mercy and leave justice unserved. Life often presents us with choices where every option carries painful consequences. Silence can be deadly. If Deborah had spoken more openly about Amara's harassment, if Michael had investigated more thoroughly, if either had broken their silence sooner, tragedy might have been prevented. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the truth we refuse to speak. Thank you for staying with me through this powerful, heartbreaking story. Michael's tragedy reminds us that the people we invite into our lives, the grief we carry, and the secrets we keep all shape our destinies in ways we cannot always foresee. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel. I bring you real, raw, emotional stories that explore the complexity of human nature, stories that make you think, feel, and question what you thought you knew about people. Hit that notification bell because part 2 is coming soon, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Does Michael ever meet his daughter? Does Amara face justice? Does healing ever come? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have handled this situation differently? Can someone like Amara ever truly be forgiven? What would you tell Michael if you could? Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Like this video, share it with someone who appreciates deep storytelling, and come back for more. Remember, everyone has a story. Some stories heal us. Others warn us. This one does both. Subscribe now and become part of our community where we explore the darkness and light of human experience together. See you in the next story.